Thanks for joining us on another For Investors, By Investors South Bay podcast. As always, we are proud to be your all-education real estate investment resource without any kind of sales pitch. If you would like to attend one of our meetings in person, we meet the second Wednesday of the month at The Point in El Segundo. You can RSVP at forinvestorsbyinvestors.com/South Bay. To find more investment resources such as blogs and podcasts from other FIBI groups, go to forinvestorsbyinvestors.com and search our library. Now, on to the podcast.
So we're here tonight to not embarrass ourselves, hopefully, but we are going to talk about economics. And this has been, I always tell people about this group, if there's one group you're going to come to every single year, this is the one, right? Because understanding kind of what's happening in the marketplace and what it means for you, whatever you are trying to do, whatever the thing is that you have an interest in, having a good understanding of from a macro level of what's happening, and more importantly, what other people think is about to happen is a great way to position yourself in real estate. So thank you guys for coming tonight. Just a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, we do have a room full of snacks over here. So if during the panel you're hungry or thirsty, feel free, you can walk around the back here and grab something to eat or drink. If you have to use the restrooms, there's a key up front that you can grab, and the restrooms are down the hall on your left. Let me get my notes here. After we are done with this panel, we do have a hard stop around 9 o'clock. And what we do for those of you your first time here is we go across the courtyard to North Italia. So we've got the entire patio reserved. We've got food out there. It's cash bar, so grab a drink. All these guys are going to come afterwards. If there's questions that you have afterwards, either with them or amongst yourselves, join us at North Italia, grab a drink, and that's really where the magic of FIBI happens. I always like to know this. Who here has done a real estate investment somehow connected to FIBI? So to me, that's the real power of this group. It's not that we're here to sell, but we are here to network and figure out where other people's strengths are, where your strengths are, and hopefully connect people. And really that happens when you're talking to other people at North Italia, not just sitting here listening to these guys talk. Although these guys are some phenomenal investors. We have a lot of good info for tonight. You might have noticed that my partner, Matt Owens, who usually sits here on my right, is not here. I got a call from Matt earlier today. He's feeling deathly ill and just couldn't make it. So what I want to do, because you guys know how Matt and I love to kid each other, what I told Matt is, of course you're ill. I hear that the paler your skin is, the more susceptible you are to disease. So that was my line. What I'd like for you guys to do is, this is Matt's email address up here. I'm not joking about this. If you wouldn't mind, send Matt an email wishing him the best of luck and make up something that I said as to why he wasn't here. We talked about maybe being involved with Harvey Weinstein.
I heard he got Zika, I'm not sure.
Right, it could be Zika. So whatever your thing is, just please, if you wouldn't mind, Matt is so sick. If you could send him a quick email wishing him the best of luck and hoping that he's okay with whatever you make up, the crazier the better, I would appreciate it. But he'll be back here next month, as good as new. We also have information here about our FIBI annual pass. For those of you who don't know that we do an annual pass now with FIBI, so if you would like to just pay one time and not have to pay every time you come, I've got a form, which is what this is. On the back here, if you actually fill it out tonight, whatever you paid to get in tonight, we'll deduct it from the cost. And yes,
good for every FIBI group?
No, this one is just good for our group. If you want to spend $100 more, we also have a pass that will get you into every FIBI group. And both of them also get you into our annual, we do an all-chapter meeting, which is December the 7th in Long Beach. So besides getting to this meeting, the annual passes also get you into our annual networking that we do 2 a year, actually, one in December, one in June. And at those meetings, there's none of this. It's just pure networking. It's literally 150 people show up, and all we do is network. It's a really great event to get a chance to meet people. I want to thank some sponsors before we get started. We have two corporate sponsors. More Financial is a hard money lender based here in LA, and actually Chase Law Group, Carol Glover here. Carol, raise your hand, please. We have two sponsors, so thank you guys for sponsoring us on a corporate level. We also have some local sponsors. First is U-Direct IRA, Jeff back here. Jeff actually has a copy of the book, which is a good book. I've actually read this book. I've got a copy of it from Karin, and suggested we do it as a giveaway. Of course, I don't know a good question, but what's a good question? How about
someone that knows all the names of the panelists?
Someone who knows the names of the panelists. Joe?
Pretty hard. I think everyone who can guess the names of the panelists should get the book.
We have a winner. Thank you, Jeff.
You bet.
We've also got Andrew with Walker Dunlop, who I do not believe is here. He usually shows up when the drinks get poured right in North Italia, right? So he'll be here later on, I'm sure. Spear Woodward is a local law firm that has been supporting us for years. Stephen Spear has always been a panelist on this at least once a year. He's a great guy. Kyle Neely with South Bay Tax and Financial Consulting. His firm is based in Hermosa Beach. And then we've also got New Western, which is a deck in his crew. Those guys are wholesalers. And lastly, we got Farmers Insurance, Jesse. Jesse Navarro and his team are used residential and commercial real estate insurance. So all of them have flyers on the back, so on your way out, from your panelists, help yourself. In November, our meeting is on flipping multifamily. And actually, Dave Jankowski here is going to be one of our panelists. We're going to talk about different strategies on holding multifamily or flipping multifamily. The date is November the 8th, and it's on Meetup right now. So if you're interested in coming back for more, learning about multifamily, we'll see you next month. And that's, the last thing I have is just before we do the introductions here, is just a reminder that, while actually we do have an attorney on the panel today, this is not meant to be either legal advice, tax advice, or investing advice. All the information we're sharing tonight is just our points of view as investors. If you have specific questions about your particular situation, we recommend you check with your own advisors. If you need a referral for someone, let us know. We will put someone in your direction.
Dave?
Yes,
Can I just say one thing real quick?
Sure.
There's actually going to be a brunch at the end of this month held. It's on a Saturday. Bruce Norris is going to be speaking. If you're interested in hearing his insights for the coming year, it's in Costa Mesa. It's something we'd be happy to help you get into. And if you're interested, you can contact me, and I'll be happy to give you information about it.
Has anyone heard Bruce speak? Yeah, so if you haven't heard Bruce Norris speak, highly recommend it. One of the kind of premier economic investing minds from this LA. So yeah, Jeff has some information back here, so if you want some more information on that, just grab a flyer, send him an email. Okay, well with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christina. We're each going to do our introductions, and we'll kind of launch into the 28 this first.
Hi, my name is Christina Suter. I'm a mom. Is that good?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so I also am a real estate investor. I've been investing in real estate for about 30 years. I started when I was 17, so if you had 17 to 30, then you know how old I am. So I'm very proud, because I'm actually almost 50. I just took my 49th birthday. And I'm actually super excited because every decade gets better. And part of the reason why every decade gets better is because I get more and more choices and more internal capacity to be a leader in my own world. And real estate is what allows me to do that. Because I've been investing in real estate for so long that I now have my particular ways of doing it. I have the people around my team. I get to make choices. I understand different parts of the field. Primarily, I've started single family, moved into multi-units, in-state, Van Nuys, out-of-state, Knoxville, Tennessee, Arlington, Texas, Virginia, Portland, Oregon, Kauai. So I've owned in a variety of places over time. I'm a hard money lender, primarily doing private equity right now. I'm back into doing flips. So I can kind of move through the field, but it's taken me 30 years to be able to use this field as a vehicle that allows me to continue to control my life and to be at leadership in my own financial world.
First of all, David, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
This This is, I think, my 4th year being on the panel.
Well, the first time you and I co-hosted this, and then we got promoted to panelists.
Apparently I did an okay job the first time. So thank you all. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces. I always appreciate seeing Mr. Glover over there and a lot of the other people that are in the room. My name is Steve Carvel. I am Manhattan Beach based, what I call wealth transfer planning attorney. I work with probably by now 650 or 700 of the wealthiest families in Southern California. On a daily basis, I am helping them manage their wealth. I'm helping them make decisions about real estate. Most of my clients are what they would consider real estate rich and cash poor, which probably a lot of people should identify with. I see some people on their heads. On a daily basis, I'm on calls with them. I'm helping them negotiate deals. I'm analyzing deals. I'm helping them develop leases. I'm helping them do all kinds of things related to the real estate world, mostly with a tax spend to them. So I think the reason that I might be on this panel is because I can see so many different things that are proposed to wealthy people. So if you cook up an idea and you manage to get it from a wealthy person, you're probably going to wind up in front of somebody like me, explaining it to them and why it's probably a good idea or not a good idea. So I think that's the perspective that I bring. Anyway, my name is Steve. It's nice to see you guys. Thank you for having me.
And Jerry, before you go, Christina, you did not mention that you were also a FIBI chapter leader and you run our Pasadena group.
I'm also a FIBI chapter leader and I'm on the Pasadena group.
Thank you very much. No, seriously.
I can be taught.
Yeah. So on Meetup, we have a list of all of our groups. Christina runs a great group. Which day do you meet?
The third Thursday of each month, we meet at the Old Town Courtyard by Marietta in Old Town, Pasadena. And different format, we have networking at the beginning, we then have some speed networking, then we have a presenter, and then you're networking after. Did I say networking? So, registered education and networking.
Awesome. Jeremy.
Thanks, Dave. Just want to say thanks everyone for coming tonight. My name is Jeremy Roll. I definitely see a lot of familiar faces, and thanks for coming back to this again if you've been here before. Try to keep it brief. So I'm a full-time passive cash flow investor. I've been investing in mostly commercial real estate, but I've done some single-family and some non-real estate stuff too for about 15 years. Co-founded For Investors, My Investors with Ellis San Jose about 10 years ago. And I actually got out of the corporate world back in 2007 after rotating all my money from stocks and bonds into cash flow. So I've been a 10-year full-time passive cash flow investor for about 15 years total. I also manage a group of over 1,000 investors who are looking for passive cash flow as well. And I'm originally from Montreal, been in LA since 2000. So thanks again for coming.
Great, thank you guys. My name is David Coe of the Co-Real Estate Team, and I've been investing for 10 years now, everything from single-family fixing and flipping to non-performing real estate notes to investing in syndicated commercial deals. And my daytime job, I'm a realtor here at Keller Williams South Bay, so thank you guys for coming to our office today. And we really specialize in dealing with distressed real estate, which could be distressed sellers, distressed properties. Usually it's both, and understanding how to handle distress is what we specialize in. Also, we're constantly on the lookout for real estate talent. We've got a couple of positions opening up here at Keller Williams and through some of the teams here. So if you know of anyone looking to get involved in real estate, please find me after the meeting. I'd love to chat with you. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Let's start talking about just where you guys mine your data. So I know all three of you are total economic geeks, and you love reading about this, and you love both processing it for your own investing and also for your clients. So Christina, talk about, like, on just a regular basis, where do you look for information, and how do you process it?
I'd like to give you something really fancy, but Fox News 24/7, the thing that tells me what's going on in 15 minutes is usually where I start. Then I go to Bloomberg, CNN, because I can listen while I'm driving, right? So I do that. My husband scans the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times for me and the Economist magazine, so he'll pull out articles for me because I don't have time to read that much material. I also enjoy Business Insider and D Short. I used to read Dr. Housing Bubble, but not so much anymore. There isn't as much going on there. And honestly, there's a thing on my phone, a little icon that says News. And I click that and I type in real estate and I scan through that to see, is there anything I'm missing? And that'll get me into the Huffington Post, it'll get me into the Chicago Times, it'll get me into a lot of newspapers I wouldn't normally have gotten to it already. And I actually, because I like mining data, my favorite websites are the FRED, which is the St. Louis Reserve. They have great charts at RSVP, and just looking at my head, the Census Bureau. So if you don't use the search engines on FRED or the Census Bureau, use Google. They'll get you to the right page. Their search engines suck. But I like that. And you can, I mean, there's something you pay for called wine charts, but I don't bother to pay for it. City-data.com. So that just is some of the places where I just gather data from.
Steve?
So maybe I'll start with where I don't get data. I don't get data from the mainstream news media. So think about this. How many of you are experts in some particular area? Like whatever your weird area of expertise is, whatever it is. What is yours? Tell me.
Test engineering.
Test engineering. Okay. Somebody else has a weird area of expertise. Carbon fiber. All right. Somebody else. Give me one more. All right. Construction. All right. So do you ever see news pieces that deal with your particular area? Right? Are they accurate? Are they even close? No, they're really not. So why do we assume that if we know they're not good in our particular little weird niche, that they're good in some other niche, right? Or some other area? So I don't start with the mainstream media. I start with other places. And I scour. There's a variety of different kinds of places. On my newsfeed, everyone starts with a website called Seeking Alpha. I don't know if any of you guys follow Seeking Alpha. I'm a big believer in sort of alternative data sources, like shadow stats. I know some of you guys listening or look at shadow stats on a regular basis. My friend Dave, who I invited today, never knew this about me. He's learning all this weird stuff about me. My wife knows that I stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning and we this weird stuff.
Any other weird things you want to share about Steve? Thank you.
I use a private browser for that, Dave. Right, so I'm always looking for like alternative sources, and I'm always applying my common sense. So basically, if someone's telling me something, I'm trying to figure out why. Why are you telling me that? Why do you believe it that way? If the government tells me something, are you reporting this, by the way?
Yeah.
Is this going online?
No.
That's good. Yeah, the government's basically telling me something, I'm not believing it, I'm figuring out something I'm not believing. I'm always looking for some alternative source on whatever it is. And I'm applying a really healthy dose of skepticism and common sense to whatever it is, but I absolutely don't believe anything in the mainstream media because I know that whatever my specialized niches are, and I can't tell you that because I hide those with private browsers, the mainstream media is completely wrong about all those things.
I don't mean to argue so early. To me, the mainstream media is about 3 to 6 months behind. And then what they assume about it is often naive.
So, from my perspective,
It's always making a story.
right, so from my perspective, yeah, so if it leads, it leads, they always have that sort of an angle. But from my perspective, think about the people who are reporting in the media. They're not experts, they're not people who are out on a day-to-day basis in the field doing whatever it is that they're reporting on. They are, they're critics, and they're skeptics, and they're reporters. And so they're not experts on any particular area. I think they're wrong most of the time. To me, it's not that they're 3 or 6 months behind, it's just that they're wrong.
So I brought an example of what you're talking. I'm going to read it off my phone in a second, so to prove your point actually about the mainstream media. But I spend the first 1 to 2 hours of my day reading before I actually have to deal with anything else, and that way I can actually focus on it. The way that I invest, I'm typically investing in a deal that might be a 10-year timeline, projected timeline, so I've got to think way ahead. So for me, it's absolutely critical to stay on top of the economic news and to really take a look at the data, get out of the weeds of the mainstream media. The minimum that I look at, typically I look at drug reports just for kind of what's kind of mainstream, so to speak. And then I also look at CNBC to really understand mainstream. And it's interesting because I don't agree, I agree with you guys that mainstream media is not a good place to look, but the problem is that the mainstream media dictates consumer sentiment. That's the problem. So that's actually, I stay on top of it for sentiment, but not for actual accurate data. I personally love a website called Zero Hedge. It's extremely pessimistic. If you've never looked at it before, you just have to ignore half the crazy articles. But the other half that actually take the data are really, really good. It's very pessimistic, I'm just warning you, but it really does a good job of parsing out the data. And so you can read that website from 2009 till now and think that the world's about to like explode the whole time. But what's important to understand is what's really going on underneath like all the underlying data, so you can invest in the right things, and that's really, really critical. Another one I really like is called calculatedriskblog.com. That one I find slightly optimistic, but very good because they literally just take the data that's released during that day and put a little bit of they actually chart it and then they just give their own quick take on it. So it's very objective for the most part. And then some of the sources you guys mentioned, I definitely agree with as well. I just want to give you guys an example though, like what kills me about the mainstream media. So I read this article on Monday on CNBC, okay? And I'm not trying to pick on CNBC, just happy to read it there. So it was talking about how the economy is doing fantastic. I don't remember, I didn't bring the headline, I really should have. So it talks, the first thing it says is that the latest CNBC economic survey shows optimism in the American economy at a 10-year high. Great. So it says manufacturing activity is at a 13-year high and service sector activity is at a 12-year high. Okay. Literally, that's about where it ends for me of like what I can actually take for granted. Because the next thing it says is semi-truck sales are out of control strong.
That tells you nothing.
It tells me nothing. It actually makes you think everything's good, but it doesn't tell you are they strong compared to last year.
Did they tell you everything that's good is not Trump's fault? I'm waiting for that part.
No, they didn't mention anything.
Okay.
See, it only took like 10 minutes to bring Trump up. So I know nothing, that tells me nothing about semi-truck sales. I don't know if they're strong compared to 2009 or compared to last year, but they say it because it sounds good. Then they say rail traffic hit a record in the week that ended September 23rd. That could be something, but the problem is the population is always growing. And so you have to look at it relative to other things. So it doesn't really tell you much either, right? And then it says, despite talk of retail is impending doom, nearly 700,000 people got hired in the sector during the past year. Fine, but again, it doesn't tell you anything, but it does put a positive spin on it, so you think it'd be good, but again, you're not getting anything of substance, right? This one I really liked. This is my favorite of the whole article. Car sales data released last week showed a huge rebound, with GM sales up 12% and Ford rising nearly 9%. Now I know why this is. This is because of the hurricanes, but they don't tell you that. So you have to actually remove the hurricane factor, and actually sales are really bad for car manufacturers this year, really bad. That's the reality, the objective reality. But they make it sound like sales are just amazing. And then airlines are carrying a record number of people. Again, the population is increasing. I used to work for Disney, and I'm not going to pick on Disney. We are recording this, I think, right? Well, anyway, so I used to work for Disney in DVD and VHS in marketing. And I don't know if you ever noticed, but the studios always talk about record box office sales. They never talk about record box office attendance numbers, meaning the number of people. Talk about record sales because the price goes up every year. So this is, what they're saying about airlines having more people doesn't tell you how much money they're making. It doesn't tell you, relative to last year, and also the population goes up each year, so you got to be very careful with that. So my point is that literally 9/10 of the article is complete garbage, but at the same time, it does give the average consumer a positive spin on what they're going to think. And so it's important to differentiate the two.
So my favorite example is back in 2012, I think this is an article, 2012, 2013, the headline of the article was, "Development Boom." And I'm like, really? So you get into the article and it says, yes, applying for permits has doubled. It's gone from 0.4% to 0.8%. Which means it went from the government, imagine, say, for me, it's graphs. Right? So what would I do when I read this BS? Basically, I go, okay, so what's my graph? Right? That's why I give you my graphing charts, right? The Fed and anything. I'll just type it in. Recent development chart in USA 2017, and I'll look for an actual chart to go. Okay, the chart was here, and now it's here, and by the way, it's doubled. Wow! But when you look at what it was over here, this doubling means nothing. It's statistically insignificant. Right, so that's my example of how I read the headline news because it's so easy to get to. I can get it on the car, I can get it in the newspaper, I can get it on my phone. What I'm looking for is the number, but then I have to have the context that that number exists in, because most of their emotional statements are just on papers.
Can I just make a little warning maybe? So the other thing that's going on modernly in our technology of the society is that we can pick the news that we want. And we have to be really careful that we don't build our own echo chamber, right? It doesn't matter what flavor of news you want, you can get it. So I'll give you guys a perfect example. They sent me the questions earlier today, and wanting to be, you guys get answers. I did a little research on Trump's tax proposal and all the analysis that's going on around it. And literally, the analysis runs the entire gamut from it's great for the middle class to it's the worst thing ever for the middle class. And if you look at the bylines that the organizations that are putting out the articles, Huffington Post, it's terrible for the middle class. I think it was the Cato Institute, a win for the middle class. So you literally can pick whatever flavor of news that you want nowadays. And I think that's really actually very dangerous. It's really important that you pull back and you try to get a broad perspective on whatever the issue is. Read it from a number of different perspectives, because you can pick what you want. I tend to be a natural pessimist. I know Jeremy tends to be a natural pessimist. And so we read organizations like Zero Hedge, but you've got to really filter that. You've got to kind of balance that.
By the way, I don't consider myself a pessimist. I'm just really low risk, so
Conservative, yes.
By the way, I just want to throw one more thing into this. What's interesting too is you cannot take some of the official data for granted either. And I'm going to give you kind of the most infamous one, which is inflation right now, which is actually really important, right? So if you take a look at Shadow Stats, which is a great website, you'll see that, and actually not just Shadow Stats, if you look at the various sources, you'll see that real inflation is probably 7 to 10%, depending on what you do per year, by the way. So that means if you're not making 10% a year after tax, you're actually falling behind, okay, or 7 to 10%. That's the reality. Now, here's some interesting stuff. First of all, did you know that in the CPI, which is the official inflation, that they do something called hedonic adjustment, which means that if you bought a TV 10 years ago that was 19 inches that cost $225, and you buy a 27-inch today that costs $250, what they do is they say, well, hold on a second, that TV is a smart TV, and it has Wi-Fi, and you can get apps on it, and it's bigger, and it looks better, and they actually adjust for the quality of you're getting from the product, like the usability, and they actually reduce the price in the way they calculate it. So that 27-inch TV that costs $250 might be adjusted to like $200. It might actually go bring inflation down, and most of the adjustments they do tend to pull it down. And the reason why they do this is because when they're looking at cost of living index increases and Social Security and other things, it benefits them to actually have a lower CPI number, even though it's not realistic. So, you can't even necessarily count on some of the official numbers. Another great one is median household income. In 2013, they changed the way that they measured median household income. That was coincidentally, Mr. Pessimistic, the first year that we had an increase in household income since 2009. They adjusted it by $1,700 up. And it's been up ever since. But if you actually take that adjustment out, we're still below the 2007 numbers for median household income. But if you read the media and you look at the official number, they say that we're now at record median household income. So you've got to be really careful and really understand the data, because even the official data isn't totally to be trusted, because they're constantly manipulating it for what they need it to do. You have to be really careful. And this is just for the purpose of your investment. You need to know where you need to be. You need to know what's really going on, so when you make an investment decision, if you decide to invest in a mobile home park because you see that inflation is running really rampant, and you think that in 5 to 10 years from now people won't be able to afford them as well, that's a decision, right? Whereas if you invest in a Class A apartment because they say inflation is low, wages are up, and these other things, you can justify that with the official information and say, yeah, people are able to afford these apartments, but you can also look at the real data and look at it different ways. So you've got to be very, very careful on what you're looking at.
So, what are some of the things that you guys follow? Jeremy, you mentioned a few things there. You're talking about a lot of things that you want to be cautious of. What are some of the things that when you're looking at stuff and you're minding, what are the things that you pay most attention to?
For me, I'm trying to really segregate two things. Consumer sentiment, so I know if and when we may have some type of downturn because we're late in the cycle. And then really what's going on with the underlying data in many different ways. Now, I invest in a lot of different asset classes. I invest in almost every asset class in commercial real estate and some other things, so I kind of look at things from many different angles. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily one thing I'm specifically paying attention to. Right now, I'm most concerned about if and when we're going to have an adjustment. The cycle works as a cycle, and there will eventually be some type of adjustment. And the question is when and how bad it's going to be and why it's going to happen. And so I'm particularly paying attention to interest rates to see if they're going up, because that could cause a bit of a challenge on the economy. Looking at household incomes, really trying to understand what's really going on. And we've had a structural problem for a very long time now with household incomes. I don't know if you guys know this, but it used to be that people used to use debt for their wants. Since 2009, if you actually look at the charts, they've actually been using debt to be able to fill the cost of living and their wants on average. So people can't even afford the needs at the moment, and they're literally using debt to fill the gap. That only started in 2009. So, knowing that type of stuff and keeping on top of it's critical for me, because I got to be able to forecast 10 years out when I'm making an investment decision in a liquid asset like real estate. So those are the kinds of things I'm looking at, nothing specific.
Steve, what about you?
It's kind of a tough question, depends on sort of what we're looking at. The housing affordability index, I think, is a pretty key indicator that I'm looking at. You might look at inflation. Just to kind of elaborate on something Jeremy said about inflation earlier, didn't get a chance to jump in. There have actually been 3 different ways of calculating inflation. I'll provide those. So there's the pre-1980 model, the 1980 to 1990 model, and the current one. And if you look at current inflation right now, under our current model, inflation is running about 2%. If you look at the pre-1990 model, inflation is running about 6%. The pre-1980 model, inflation is running just under 10%. Right? So when Jeremy said you can't even believe the numbers that the government's giving you, you can't even believe the numbers that the government's giving you. Because if they don't like the numbers, they just change the methodology of creating the number. Right? So that's, yes? So luckily I don't remember that.
Obviously, you're but I mean, there was crazy interest rates.
So interest rates were really high in the late 70s and early 80s. I think interest rates were running 17, 18%. Is there anybody here? I didn't want to look at Dave, but I was kind of looking toward Dave. Dave, remember those days?
I bought a property with 18% first.
In 79, 80?
80, yeah, in the mid-80s.
In the mid-80s.
And inflation was running so hard, they were so
Okay, all right.
And actually,
18% didn't happen.
so the major change they made in 1982 to actually measure inflation was the major change that they changed from looking at rents, probably because inflation was spiking off very quickly, to what they call the, I forget the term, but they're looking at the price of a home, but they look at the equivalent rent based on the price of a home. So they started actually completely neglecting how much rents are going up, and they looked at the price of home, and because back then they weren't going crazy like they are today, and they were able to kind of do a rental equivalent based on the cost of that. And so, but they did it just to make it, to get the numbers where they needed it to be.
Christine, what about you? What are some of the things that you find most relevant when you're reading information?
I give an economic update. Pretty much once a year at my club. So I follow the same format every time. Gross domestic product, long-term wage growth, real wages, GPA per capita, the debt ceiling, not just our debt ceiling, but where we are in relationship to other countries, because we're at 100%, more than 100%. Right? But other countries are sometimes at 100, 150, 200, so where we are in relationship to them. The CPI, of course, and the shadow statistics for CPI. And employment, of course, and the shadow statistics for employment or unemployment. The producer price index. And then I try to compare them against each other. Some are moving forward, some are moving back. And where is it generally that we're going? One of the things I really try to keep in mind is the gross domestic product. I think you just talked to us. And it was it used to be that we were getting 7% GDP. And in order to recover from the recession we just had, they said we need to start achieving 7% GDP. But our GDP right now is 3.1. We're all excited. It's going to be 3.1 this year.
It's actually only average 2 this year so far.
Right. So you look at it in comparison to our history, and it's people get excited that we're moving forward, but you start looking at an international market. Somebody said that we're the least dirty shirt in the laundry. It really doesn't mean we're doing that well as far as our history goes, but we're not sinking. And that's kind of what I'm looking for, is where are we in relationship to our history? So when I look at these particular numbers, I do look at stock growth. I do look at, the S&P 500 and where we are in relationship to our history and the NASDAQ. So I do look at this, but I also look at it internationally, where are we in comparison to other countries and where are we in comparison to our history.
So, where do you guys think we're at? Do you think we're cruising towards a recession? I mean, I know everyone is certainly closer, but how close is it? What do you guys think individually on that?
Can I just jump in on something really quick and elaborate on something Christina said, which is unemployment, right? So we were talking about how you can't trust the government numbers. So the broadest measure of unemployment produced by the government currently, so looking back at the methodology in determining unemployment changed in 1990, right? Why do you think it changed in 1990? Currently, the official number of unemployment is hovering right around 3%. I'm sorry, 6%. If you employ the pre-1994 methodology to determine unemployment, we're hovering right around about 9%, a little over 9%, just under 10% right now. Right. So, do you want to guess at what the shadow number of real unemployment takes into consideration long-term discouraged workers and fibers? Hang on, make the rest of the question out. And people who are only, just a second, this is the question. Who are only able to find seasonal employment and part-time employment. Does anyone know what the shadow stat real unemployment number is?
I think they let them do it.
Joe?
Joe?
It's 21.5%. Alright, 21.5%. So think about that. 1 in 5 Americans who are eligible to be employed are unemployed. Right? So if the question was, where do we think the economy is going? And looking at the factors that affect the economy, to me, one of the largest ones is unemployment. Right? And what is unemployment? Is it 6%? Is it 9%? Or is it 21.5%? And what is it locally in whatever region we're looking at investing in? What is it in California? Is it 21.5%? It seems to me like that's probably pretty close to 21.5%. So where do we think the economy is going? I don't know. I'll pass that to Jeremy. Jeremy, you want to talk about that?
I specifically told them when we regrouped before this not to do that.
You can always count on your associates to, follow what you want.
This is what I get for, secretly putting them in the middle. So,
yes, because of course that was pre-decided before as well, that we were not going to do that.
For me, I like looking at historical data always, and because I feel like it's typically applicable. So we're about 100 months into this recovery, and it's actually, you wrote a good blog about this, right? So if anyone got a chance to read the blogs that we send out, this is what was written about that. And we're 100 months in roughly. We're the third longest recovery ever on record right now, going all the way back to 18 something. And the more recent recoveries have been longer, in all fairness, than the average. But next year will be I think it was in May, will be the second longest recovery ever, and then the year after, if we continue, in July will be the longest recovery ever. So, given that the economy is cyclical, at some point we will have a downturn. Now, whether that's because Trump can't push anything through for the rest of the year, and then everyone finally realizes nothing's happened, and then early next year something happens, or whether it just keeps going. But the bottom line is, let's say it's probably fair to say that at the most 3 to 4 years from now, there'll be an adjustment, and it could be in a couple months. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. And it's hard to it's kind of hard to argue with that likelihood, right? The probability is very high that that's actually what's going to take place. So I'm investing with that in mind, And again, keep in mind, I have to invest differently than maybe some other people here who I have to think 10 years. I've actually been investing for a recession since 2013 because I get locked in for 10 years. So I've been thinking way ahead, and now just watching to see what happens.
How do you not invest in recession-resistant assets if your timeline in your head is 10 years, and we pretty much have a real estate downturn or recession in almost every 10 years?
Well, first of all, that's fine. You can have a typical recovery happen in 5 years, and you got to be even more careful. And that's why I kind of did that, because I expected a recession in about 2018. So I started investing for a recession in 2013 in anticipation of that. But the bottom line is that it's kind of a complicated answer. Some assets will do better than others during a downturn. So I invest in mobile home parks, I invest in self-storage, I invest in other things. Those will probably do the right locations, most of those will do very well in the downturn. Apartments tend to do pretty well in the downturn because the rents are pretty sticky. The key to those types of assets is actually when the loan comes due to refi. So I like to try to, my biggest concern is to stay away from refis when I think the recession is going to happen. And then you don't know if there's going to be liquidity, and I actually like to be locked into longer term interest rates at the moment because eventually rates will probably go up at some point, maybe not, but I don't want to have to worry about whether they will or won't. So those are the kinds of things that I'm more worried about as opposed to like getting the timing exactly right.
Okay.
So let me elaborate or catch everybody up on the cycle that Jeremy is discussing. Who read my wonderful blog post that came out yesterday? My 2 people. Let me catch the rest of you up. So this is 1864.
Just came out yesterday.
That's right. All right. Catch up, will you? Since 1864, we've been tracking business cycles in this country. From 1864 to 1845, those are the historical cycles. From 1845 to present, those are what we think of as the modern cycles. If you look back all the way to the very beginning, 1864, the average business cycle has run about 56 and a half months. That's from peak to peak, recession and recovery. Okay, peak to peak, recession and recovery. The modern cycles from 1945 to present have been averaging about 65 months peak to peak. Right now, if you consider that this cycle really began in June of 2009, we're 100 months into the current business cycle, right? So if everything is cyclical, and we're 100 months in, and everything's just a matter of time, the question is, how close are we getting to that? There have been 3 cycles in the modern history, of cycles, that have lasted 100 months or greater. There have been 2 at 100 months, and there's been 1 in the late 1990s that ran 124 months, right? So by any measure, we're getting close to the end of the business cycle. The question is, how close are we to the end of the business cycle, and how do we position ourselves to either capitalize on it or hedge against the potential downside?
So what are you advising your clients?
So I advise my clients on a case-by-case basis, and realistically, when I look at my clients, I look at them sort of from a portfolio perspective. How much risk can they afford to have? Do they have some risk? Do they have some assets that have risk? Do they have other assets that are more secure and less risky? So as a lawyer, I'm really sure not to be too aggressive in what we're proposing that might be done, and I often make sure that they're getting good advice from other people. So I don't know. I can't. If you go to the spot, what am I recommending to go into? Lawyers don't recommend that they go into anything. Lawyers recommend that they analyze whatever it is that they're considering.
I know you don't advise them on what to go into, but they bring you ideas and you say, look, based on where we're at in the cycle, we think that's a good idea or bad idea.
So right now I'm the no guy, right? Right now it's pretty hard to get to a yes with me. I look at things and I'm very pessimistic about where I think we're going. What are some of the things that are easier for me to say yes to are the things that I view as sort of no-brainers. Those are things on the sort of lower end of the spectrum, because the way that I view it is, if we have a decline, there's always going to be a housing requirement sort of in the middle to lower end of the tier, right? And the people in the middle to lower end of the tier, or at least those housing units, are not going to change. There's always going to be a demand for those units. At the high end, the demand might decrease. At the low end, you might have higher turnover. But a couple of steps above the low end is actually where I kind of like.
So, just to be transparent, that was my babysitter who called and just told me that she doesn't have a key to the house. So, they're going to sushi, and then I'll be leaving right after we're done here. To pick up my daughter.
I would also like to point out that our babysitter, after interrupting, sent a text that said, sorry to interrupt.
She did say sorry for interrupting. She's a great babysitter.
I feel like you're not being honest, you just want to get out of this panel.
You can't scare me, Jared. I've been on the panel with you before. I can handle it. But he's a little scared though.
Mr. No?
Mr. Know-it-all. Oh no, Mr. B seems to know so much. You know a lot. I mean, he's like, okay, who's going to handle the economic questions? Because I can't do it. Excuse me. You're handling the bulk of this here,
So I thought I was just supposed to talk with a really sexy Australian accent, but apparently that's not the case.
Well,
those that have been coming for years, remember Alan has always been a panelist here, but Alan has hung up his economic chops, I guess, into semi-retirement. So anyone who knows Alan Hamilton, send him an email as well.
So
I have a question on who doesn't particularly recommend. But, the early economic cycles in our country, 56 months, modern era 65 months. We're 100 months now without a recession. Is it possible that we actually have had a recession and we've monkeyed around with the numbers so much, we're just not acknowledging it?
I think the better way to look at it is that if there wasn't all this crazy stimulus, we would have had a recession again. Right? And so actually that's what's making this cycle really hard to predict. Because you're looking at, like if we end up in a record, I mean you can almost for certainly attribute it to the fact that there was this crazy stimulus. Right? Not because the economy is strong and not because it was doing anything spectacular and making its way through. So that's probably the better way to look at it, I think.
Could I throw one thing in? I think we've never in the history of, at least in my political memory, had an administration that so many people wanted to fail, right? And so when you look at how you make an administration fail and how you change administrations, the way that traditionally you've done that is you've caused people to vote their pocketbooks. There have been triggers that have happened that have caused economic stumbles that have caused changes in administrations, right? So one of the things that I'm considering when I look at the big picture is how many people want the current administration to fail? How many people want the current administration to have egg on its face? And how are they going to do that? So that's one of the things that I think about. So your question was, is it possible that we've stumbled past? I don't think we've stumbled past at this point in time. But I think the longer that we wait, the bigger it's going to be. And I sort of like it into a California earthquake. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Right? And the longer that we wait between major earthquakes, the greater the amount of pressure that's built up, and the greater the catastrophe that's likely to happen.
You can all have drinks after this. Yeah.
So when I was originally, because we've all been investors through the last downturn, through the Great Recession, and it really taught me to not turn my eye away from the economics, because it didn't matter how smart I was or what I thought I was doing that was smart. My little opinion didn't matter. I noticed the economy moved on without me and didn't really care what I thought I was up to on a project I was doing. So it's much bigger than I am. So it's not a force you want to not be staring at and keeping track of and being present to. And you want to be very specific about your investments and then being recession resistant and then being regionally appropriate and then being diversified well for your portfolio and what your design is. So I talk to people about this a lot because that's one of the things I do is I'm a consultant specifically working with real estate investors. So I spend time having this conversation. And I get the question like, well, where do you think we're going, Christina? Because that's one of the things that I obviously think is important. I, for the longest time, was saying our peak was going to be summer of 2017. And that's where we are now. And then I got concerned for a little while there. About a year ago, I kind of stepped back on my hunches and I went, okay, I'm not seeing the aggressive, generally, if you think of real estate or stocks and bonds, you see what I call the exponential part of the cycle. There's this aggressive push. We weren't seeing that, an aggressive push. We were seeing more of a plateau. Right? It went up in 2013 and then it started to plateau. It's like, oh shoot, is it going to just drop out from under us? Are we going to have a horrible recession? Are we going to go the way of Japan? Are we going to keep sliding sideways because there just isn't enough going on in the economy? We have all this quantitative easing. Stock market's going one way, real estate's going another way, and the economy's doing nothing in reality. In reality, the economy isn't moving. It's only weak and not even showing strong gross domestic product numbers. It's not showing, yes, we have unemployment recovery, but we have huge shadow statistics for what that quote-unquote unemployment recovery is. So the economy's creeping all along, from my opinion, to sound like today's newspapers, right? In my opinion, the economy itself is creeping. But the stock and bond market has turned exponential, and the real estate market is turning exponential. So either to my disappointment or to my great relief, we've gone exponential on the real estate market. So therefore, it means we're going to have a downturn. For me, I said, okay, I think we're good through summer of 2017. It looks like there's enough consumer confidence. It looks like there's enough movement in the affordability index. It looks like there's enough gap between existing home prices and new home prices at 36%. So it looks like there's enough capacity in the real estate market to continue to hold itself, and that real estate isn't going to be the thing that triggers this next economic downturn. I know Jeremy's itching to talk.
No, I actually want to ask the audience a question.
Okay.
I don't want to interrupt.
Okay, thank you. So I went, okay, and I listened to Bruce Norris. I'm a Bruce Norris follower and believer, I admit it. And Bruce is saying the same sort of thing. Right? Now, just because somebody agrees with you that you think is smarter than you are doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to happen. But what I am willing to advise is we're not going to go just the way of Japan, which is there is no recovery. It took, was it 10 years for just some, and then 20 years for the real estate market to recover after the Great Depression. And so there was a good chance that we literally would go sideways. So I think we're going to have a cycle. I think we're going to have a downturn. I personally am now targeting summer of 2018. So I do not do 10-year horizon lines. I don't even do 3-year horizon lines right now. I literally do 6 months or a year, not much longer than that. So all of that said, from my personal opinion, I do think real estate's not going to lead the downturn. I'm a little more afraid of the stock and bond market leading the downturn, and the confidence, whether it's the loss in Trump, right, the loss of confidence in Trump, or whether it's a international concern or situation, or an actual drop in stocks and bonds. And that's what I'm watching for. See, I'm watching for a trigger, because I'm looking at 2 exponential markets that are both in bubbles that could at any point drop, but I'm only doing a 6-month to 1-year horizon line. So if you see the game I'm playing in my investing, I'm not suggesting anybody else do this, I'm just telling you what I'm doing.
Sure.
Yeah, so just to show a hands up curiosity, so how many people in this room think there's going to be a recession in 2018? Okay, a few. What about 2019? More. Okay, after 2019. Okay, 2019 is the most popular, just so everybody knows. So I was curious.
Well, Doug Duncan, because much to contrary personal belief, Doug Duncan at the ISO Real Estate Bruce Norris fundraising event, how many people were there? Some of you guys have heard this. Doug Duncan, who is the VP Economic Forecaster for Fannie Mae. And so he should know what he's talking about in theory, because he's running a section of our financial institutions. His comment was 30 to 40 months. And I'm calculating in my head going, did he really just say? I'm like, I won't go longer than 18 months in my thinking. 30, so just letting you know. Now, I don't know, it might be, what's it called, good marketing? He might be doing good marketing, I have no idea. Just saying, that's what I've heard.
That might be the timing to the next election.
Might be the time for the next election. I didn't do that calculation.
Question, go ahead.
A lot of times in uncertain markets, you'll hear to put all of your money in cash or a fair amount of cash, right? So let's say you've been investing over the years, you have money that you've been allocating towards other investments, and now you're just going to hold it in cash. What are some sophisticated options to hold money in cash? I mean, other than just either in your mattress or in a checking account. Like, people do CDs? Do you do? I mean, what's a cash alternative to cash?
So I'm going to let you address this, but I will say this. It depends on how conservative you want to be. Because, like, for example, a lot of people don't know this. If you invest, if you just put money, deposit money into your Fidelity account, and I'm using Fidelity because I have Fidelity, unless your account is set up to be cash and cash equivalent, you automatically go into money market, which actually has a slight risk, right? But you think it's cash. So, for the additional, God knows whatever yield that's probably almost zero, is it worth the risk, right? So it really depends on your risk profile. Like, I actually personally keep my money in cash, and you may have some good options, but I just keep it in cash, and I spread it across a couple things. And also, just so you guys know, in 2008 when we had the downturn, the FDIC, insured the banks at $250, but they actually insured the brokerage accounts at $500, which they weren't really marketing to anybody because they didn't want money coming out of the banks going to brokerage accounts. So I put my money in. That's why my money's more in Fidelity than it is in Bank of America, for example. I don't know if you have any better recommendations.
So that coverage in brokerage accounts is called SIPC coverage, it's similar to RBC coverage. So I learned this lesson the really hard way. I forget what month it was, in 2009 I had a client who had about $1.5 million in a Freddie Mac bank? I can't remember exactly what it was, right? So there was a run on that bank. My little old lady client, who at that point in time was like 87 years old, calls me and she says, the bank is, there's one of the bank, and I have $1.5 million in the bank. And I said, no problem, you got FIDC or FDIC coverage for each of you and your husband and every beneficiary under your trust. And she goes, well, that account's not in the trust. I just have that one in my own name. Right? She lost a significant amount of money. So in terms of holding cash in a sophisticated way, one of the things you want to be sure of is that you have FDIC coverage in an amount to cover all of that cash. No matter how much cash that you're talking about, you're talking about more than $250,000, you need to make sure that it's covered under FDIC coverage. Some sophisticated banks will reinvest it for you. You can have it all in one bank and one account, and they'll park it in other banks, so you don't have to run a little town. They have agreements with other banks. So in terms of sophisticated ways of holding cash, the key thing is just to make sure you're not going to lose your cash, right?
So,
Yeah.
is it okay if I take a shot at that?
Yeah.
Okay. Previous to when I was in 2016, I'm wondering which way is the market going to go. I was keeping anywhere about a third to a fourth of my portfolio of pure cash, just cash. I also had at least another third in loans that were rotating every 6 months or less. So I potentially had
First trustee kind of loans.
First trustee, some seconds, one or some seconds, but basically private equity lending. And so I had potentially at any point that I was capable of going, okay, I think my indicators are saying I need to be liquid now, and well, it could be 2/3 liquid in 6 months. So now, because I really do feel like the timeline has pushed out at least 18 months, I don't have nearly as much in cash. I have a lot more out in the longer term, 12 months, but still not longer than 12 months at this point.
I just want to add though that, again, it depends on how low or big. I actually know people who are doing a lot of short-term lending right now because that's the closest to being liquid is 6 months horizon. I won't do that because I don't want to be in a game of musical chairs and if it stops and I can't get my way. Actually what's going to happen is that Christine is actually going to end up making more money off those loans in the long term at the right loan to values than she would off the interest rate, so she's probably very happy. I look for predictability, so because I live off the cash flow, so I can't afford to wait a year to foreclose on somebody and resell it and make more money. So it really, you got to be careful. I just want to throw that out for people that are familiar with the lending because even though in the long term you'll probably do well, there could be some hiccups in the cash flow, and then it all depends on your risk profile. So just be careful with that.
Well, and I also said I don't take my eye off the big bear in the room. I mean, I'm always. My husband scours literally the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times every day so that I get feedback every day on what's going on because just because I feel comfortable and confident doesn't mean that we're not going to go to war all of a sudden. It doesn't mean that something's not going to start sliding. And I probably, depending upon the extremeness of the trigger, I probably literally have 3 to 6 months to be able to try to bring all my money home.
Great.
There was issues before that look at the possibly the bond markets as a trigger. I'm not really looking for a trigger. I'm looking more for a predictive indicator kind of thing as to what might put the market or the economy in downturn. A predictive indicator might be a single stat or a ratio of statistics or anything. You guys
mentioned next
tip. This will fly over again.
You probably designed this system.
Not the meteor that nearly missed Earth earlier this week.
He actually probably designed the system to shoot it down, so I think we're in good hands. No, but you guys mentioned looking for exponential growth at the end of the cycle, right? Is that something that you would look at as a potential trigger or something about to happen?
I do count that as the clock is running, and there's a point where that clock stops, and so I'm more vigilant now about understanding timelines than I am in 2012 and 13 when I'm like, okay, we finally hit the bottom, now we're actually moving up. Okay, well I got a couple of years ahead of me. Right? It's not a single indicator for me. It'd be multiple indicators. You would literally have to be consumer confidence. It would have to be gross domestic product. It would have to be employment. It would have to be real wages. I would look at all the charts I just mentioned earlier, and I'd look at them together and go, are any of these starting to show plateauing and or falling? Because I'm looking for the confusion in the charts. right? So it's like there's a consistency in the charts, okay, we're doing pretty good, but then when there's confusion in the charts, then I go, well, how long is that confusion going on for?
In the stock market, you might want to, an indicator might be that the stock price is going up and the volume is going down, right? That's kind of nervous time, right?
Right, so we're getting close to the top.
Yeah, for the stock market, a really good one is the negative yield curve. So the difference between the 2-year and the 10-year treasury, once it inverts, then you typically, it depends on what data you read, but you've got multiple months or longer before a recession probably. Now, with all the stimulus and everything else, I don't know what's going to happen with that. That's the challenge. So.
Didn't the curve invert last in 2007 sometime? Like big news, I remember, like the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, I mean, it always inverts before. I mean, I say always, but the problem right now is that it's just there's a lot of stimulus. So I don't know if anyone has an opinion. I actually don't follow the stock market much, except for consumer sentiment, because I have no stocks. So I'm not as well versed on that as some other stuff. But I'm pretty sure that the yield curve will probably invert before a recession. I mean, if you look at history, it's very probable not happening.
We keep mentioning recession. What does it look like? Best case, worst case?
We're not pessimists though.
5% drop tomorrow, 50% drop. I mean, what do we? How does that affect the average Southern California investor?
Are you asking about stock prices, like house? What are you asking about?
So, B properties in Southern California. When this recession hits, what is the timetable of prices, interest rates, and what? I think that's the big question. How bad is it going to be? How quick is it going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I invest almost exclusively out of California because I invest for cash flow, so for hard cash flow. So I'm going to defer to someone else on the panel to answer their opinion about California.
So California is such a unique, it's almost like an outlier when you consider the rest of the country. There's constant upward pressure here for a lot of reasons. Expanding population, higher wages than other parts of the country. So
Foreign capital.
there's a ton of foreign capital still flowing here, and there's instability in the rest of the world. Capital seeking safety, so we see even more of it coming in. We see more of it here along the beach areas. So I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just telling you, California real estate may not be indicative of everything else.
Okay, so when I think about an economic recession, one of the things that I've projected, have faith in, unless the indicators tell me something different, is that it's not going to start in real estate. I mean, we have lower volume, we have growing prices, but we seem to not have overly leveraged houses. We don't seem to have, affordability indexes not working, and then the price home and the existing price home have space in them. So when I look at the indicators inside of the real estate world, I go, I'm seeing behavior in real estate that concerns me because it's exponential, but I'm not seeing that it's unstable yet. And it needs to be more top heavy. So I don't think it's going to start in real estate. Do I think we're going to have a recession? Yes, I think we're going to have a recession. We breathe in, we breathe out. We have a recession, we have a boom. Like last time I checked, that's the way human nature seems to move. I'm not going to question human nature. Right? So I think it's going to start somewhere else. So if it starts somewhere else, then I go, what does that mean to me? Well, I'm not really on the front line because the bulk of my portfolio is not stocks. So I'm not on that front. I'm on the real estate front. Real estate's based more in real wages, real estate houses jobs. It's based more in the effect of people losing their jobs. It's based more in consumer confidence, and it's based more on people willing to move and housing formation. Okay? So what I go to is I go, okay, it's going to start somewhere else. Then companies are going to start having a hard time. Then they're going to start reducing wages. Then we're going to see a reduction in rents. Then we're going to see consumer confidence is going to start to slip, both because of the news and as well as I just got a pay cut or I just lost my job. Right? So we see it in the unemployment and real wages number. So I'm saying, okay, I'm thinking that there's going to be a timeline here. I don't know if it's 6 months. I don't know if it's 12 months between we're in trouble or we have some version of a recession. And it's going to hit the value of my real estate. Okay, so that said, that is in cash flow properties. Right? But if you're looking in Southern California, San Francisco, New York, Moscow, I've never invested in Moscow, but I have to know it's highly appreciated. Right? Denver, Colorado, because it's kind of way off the charts. And you're looking at high levels of appreciation. then that's a different beast, right? It's much more vulnerable to foreign capital not liking us. It's much more vulnerable to, I'm not going to be able to sustain this home. It's much more vulnerable to, the company is losing its capital, it's losing its access. So when we start seeing a downturn in California in highly appreciated markets, we're going to see double-digit downturns. Like 10%, 15%, 20%, unless it's a stabilized neighborhood that has low turnover like Pasadena. I happen to know, because Pasadena only down less than 15% in the last downturn. I was a little bummed because I was hoping to buy in, and I couldn't buy in my own neighborhood, okay? So that's why I happen to know that number. So, but you're going to see in other areas, you're going to see a downturn of, 20%. So does that answer your question?
And if I could even add on like this, we are already seeing decreases in home prices in California. Now, it's not in every segment, right? It's kind of started in the upper end of the market. It's starting to,
and in the bottom.
The 5 million and above. Actually, even the lower end stuff.
There was some of the bottom, well, there was some, 6 months ago, they were targeting that the lower end was actually starting to have some softening, and then it seemed to show up more statistically significantly in the 5 million and now the 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything, even now in the $1.5 million range, $1 million range, there's the plateau that we've been seeing has been slowly trickling down. So I also personally think that we're not going to see the huge, decrease like we did in 2008, just because we've been writing such better loans. If there's one thing that Dodd-Frank has done, has stabilized the lending industry. So it's not a bunch of toxic trash out there that's just going to collapse the whole system. They've been pretty good paper for the last years.
Yeah, just to add that, so I don't invest in the California government, but I will quote someone who does, like Bruce Norris, who's someone you may not have seen. He's great. He's probably one of the most renowned people that tracks and tries to forecast California residential housing. So his opinion for the next downturn here is that we might see a 10% on average decrease. That's across the entire state. So that's not, the problem is that it's very local, right? So like Inland Empire might do something different than Manhattan Beach. But he was predicting 10%, which to him means it's going to have a slight downturn. But then he's actually expecting it to be flat for the next cycle, the entire cycle in California, which is very different than what just happened now. So just passing that along because he's pretty well known. And I personally have a lot of respect for him. I really like to hear what he has to say.
I have a question. I mean, I know all of you are invested in partnerships that are sponsored. What do you hear from the sponsors of these deals that you're in? Are any of them saying, whoa, I need to think about selling because we're about to go down? Or are they all still pretty optimistic and they say, hey, we're just going to hold on, we're going to hold through this thing?
You want me to start with that?
Yeah,
Okay.
You're the one who has the most of that.
Yeah, I focus. So I forgot to. So I'm in over 70 different opportunities right now, and I've been in over 100 over the past 15 years. So I definitely deal with this a lot. So I've been lobbying my sponsors to sell for like 2 years, and I've been involved in. I'm currently involved in I think 12 deals that are currently either under contract for sale or up for sale right now. And probably been involved. I don't know how many sales I've been involved in the last 24 months, but there's been a number. And so what I'm seeing is some sponsors who are saying, yeah, it's end of cycle, like this makes sense. Even stuff that I invested in 2 years ago that was meant to go on for 10 years, but the prices have spiked so much that we're exiting, which I'm very happy about. And then I'm also seeing there's the odd asset class where prices are already adjusting. Now keep in mind, I invest mostly in commercial real estate. So in self-storage, I actually invest with the top 20 self-storage operator in the US. And he's been telling me he saw at the beginning of this year some of the prices about a half a cap rate percentage go up just because there was too much of a spread between what buyers were asking, what buyers were willing to pay and what sellers were asking. And that actually closed a little bit. So there's already been a bit of an adjustment in that asset class, for example. But that was also the asset class that actually had the biggest run in actual, indexed back to the beginning of the cycle compared to any of the other major asset classes. So that makes sense. It's already like one of the first to adjust. So it really depends. I can speak completely honest with you. I get really nervous when I see an operator who is just buying at market rates today and is not worried. So if they're buying at market rates and they're worried and they're trying to find a specific type of deal and they're justifying it a certain way with a certain strategy, that's one thing. But someone who doesn't have the experience is just blindly saying, yeah, this is a great deal at a 4.5 cap in Texas, for a Class B apartment, just making that up. I actually know somebody, I don't know how many of you know mobile home parks, but I know someone who bought a 4.3 cap mobile home park that was like just a regular Class B park recently, two of them in their fund. And I was like flabbergasted. I did not invest in the fund, but But just to give you, like, there's some crazy stuff going on out there, and it's that kind of thing that worries me when they don't really see what's wrong with that. You know, they were like 90-something% occupied, they weren't like 20% occupied.
How long did you actually hear us indicate you're saying? Because of the market information.
To liquidate,
Or to shift our strategy.
to shift strategy? Very often. Yeah. That's the ones that I've been investing with for years, and most of them have shifted their strategy, and some of us shifted their strategy. But one of the multifamily syndicate I've invested with, over $1 billion of apartments, shifted their strategy in 2014. I shifted my own multifamily strategy in 2013. So.
Is the smart money going into cash? What do you do?
Did anybody have smart money here? My money's not.
Things are not 20, self-storage.
Yeah. Well, no. Let me just say this. I am a very happy seller right now, okay? But I've also made over 10 investments this year. And every single one of those has been really unique. Like either unique pricing, something's unique. Some of the sponsors are like the top 20 self-storage operator. He's still buying a ton of stuff. He's buying, everything he's buying is at a unique price, and he's also buying value-add stuff so you can add value to it. So you have a unique price for padding. He's adding padding for the next 12 months. So if something happens, he's like got double padding. And he's going to be fine because that asset class tends to do well in the downturn in the right areas.
I would say that's probably the biggest thing that we're seeing, even in residential properties, looking for value add, right? Finding something that's distressed that no one wants to buy. There's so much money out there. So finding opportunity you can create in the deal to value add, I think is what a lot of different investors are doing right now. You have a question?
Yeah. So I know there's been a lot of talk about state pensions and that could be a trigger to, the next recession. But I was curious, like, what your guys' thoughts on are how soon something like that would affect people like us, or kind of like the way like she was explaining, like what happens after each step. So something like that would happen, how would it affect?
And you talk about a large pension fund.
Yeah.
Any comment on that?
So, I don't really know what to say. Do I really believe that we're going to see right now is on public pensions? I don't know. Are we going? Is there nowhere to go with public pensions? But right now, to elaborate on something Christina said, the financial markets experience volatility. They move faster than the real estate markets do. It's just a function of their fungibility and tradability. So, if you're going to see it, you will see it in the financial markets first. You will see it in the real estate markets first. The real estate markets will follow. All of the markets will follow the real estate markets.
Yeah, they're already starting to, so like the way I would describe it is that like the cracks are just beginning, but everything's still sticking together. And so like there's a good example of there was a Dallas, I think, police and firefighters fund that had a big problem this year, and they had like an exodus of people, but they kind of still kept it together. And the problem, like everything else that goes on, I'm from Canada, so like everything else that goes on in this country, it seems right now with debt, they're just kicking the can down the road. That one could be kicked for a while still. So that's why that's why the stock market hasn't tanked as a result of it yet. There will come a day where the cracks will just not be able to hold together and something's going to happen. And it could be maybe what results in maybe the next recession or whatever it is. And maybe it's going to come sooner than we think and surprise everybody. I personally think that in the next 20 to 30 years, it's going to be an absolute gigantic problem because it's not just the public, it's also private pension funds, Social Security, Medicare. All these things are, in my opinion, probably going to start to come to head in maybe 2030 to 40 and possibly before then, but almost certainly by then. And I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, they theoretically need to write them down. So people need to realize that they thought they were going to make $1,500 a month, and now they're going to make $600. And I don't even tell you what effect that could have on the economy. That's just,
think about that. Those blocks of people are huge voting blocks. So public pension recipients, they hold huge political sway, right? So if anything's going to be propped up, if there's going to be stimulus that really applies anywhere, I think we can expect it's going to be the public pension markets, right? Because those people will vote as a rock and they'll move to popular politics.
So speaking of stimulus, let's kind of move on to talk. So I know we mentioned both interest rates and quantitative easing. Clearly, there's been a huge effort by the government to try to keep this thing cranking along. Let's talk about, first of all, interest rates. We mentioned that. I think all of you guys have mentioned that. How long can we continue to artificially, decrease our interest rates? It some point in time.
So every
run
single
out.
one of these panels, we've addressed this issue, and every single one of them, I said 12 to 18 months. I've been wrong.
Many years.
Actually, you won't be wrong the first 3 years.
I've been wrong.
You still get a shot for the next 2
That's
years.
right. As long as I keep saying this, 18 months, eventually I'm going to be correct, right? So in preparing for this, I reached out to a ton of mortgage brokers and a lot of people that I think are really smart in that world. And I was at the gym the other day and I saw one video on your loan. They said, hey, what's going to happen with interest rates? He said, they're going to go up. And I said, thanks, Coach Columbus. So, you know, when is it going to happen?
Sure just didn't want to spot.
Yeah, I wasn't going to do it. So it would be a good answer. So anyway, when is it going to happen? I don't know. I will tell you this. The Fed met in September. They had an announcement. Their announcement was one more bump in 2017 and 3 bumps in 2018. What that's going to mean, I don't really know. Right? We've also heard them say things like that before, because I know that I sat on this panel years ago and said the exact same thing. The Fed is floating the idea of rising interest rates, right? Did they actually follow through with it? At least no, they didn't. They were floating the idea to see what the sentiment was going to. So, are we going to see a rise? Here's my answer. Yes. Jeremy, what do you think?
I think that right now, I think the reason why the stock market's holding together, even though they've already said they're going to remove stimulus, already started to do this, is because people believe either that Trump's going to be able to push through some of these initiatives, and also because they don't believe the Fed. The Fed has lost a lot of credibility because they've been talking about doing it for a long time, but they haven't done it because they're nervous because they know what's going to happen. And by the way, 100% of the time that the Fed starts to increase interest rates ahead of a recession or reduce stimulus, 100% of the time it's always led to a recession. And they obviously know that. So, you know, do I think we're going to have an increase in interest rates? We're for sure going to have an increase in interest rates in the very, very short term. In the medium to long term, I think we can continue these low interest rates. Just look at Japan. I think we can continue these low interest rates for, honestly, for decades, for 1 to 2 decades easily.
I have to sort of mimic that one. I'm of the same belief, which is, you know, we're not negative, guys. There's countries in Europe that are negative in their interest rates. So even though this is groundbreaking for us, you know, and again, you know, the concept of we're the least dirty shirt in the laundry, right? So personally, I would have thought, when we had hit this huge downturn, that we were alone. And while you do a little research, and you see there are all kinds of countries having a great recession. Now we're doing all this quantitative easing, we have this huge amount of debt out there. And I'm thinking, okay, at some point, hyperinflation has got to kick in and people have got to stop having faith in the United States. We're more over-leveraged than we've ever been. Oh, not true. World War II is leveraged. But that's besides the point. We're more over-leveraged than we've been in a long time. Nope, people are still having faith in the Treasury. They're still buying U.S. Treasuries. China's not going to buy us anymore. Huh? They're still owning about the same amount as they did before. So I keep waiting for somebody to be upset with us. I'm just really sorry. I'm waiting for somebody to be upset with us as a country, but I've noticed that the Treasury, which isn't just our own opinion, I mean, we try to obviously manipulate it a lot through the quantitative easing, but we're not the only one who has an opinion on whether they're going to buy our Treasury bills or not, what our interest rate is going to be or not. They keep continuing to have faith in this country that somehow we're moving forward at least 3%. So it could absolutely go, remember I said we've got S&P going this way, we've got real estate going that way, and we have real economy happening down here. And the three separated. Back in 2000 is when it started, but during the Great Recession is when the three separated from each other. And they started behaving independently. Quantitative easing created the S&P to move independently from the economy. Right? Real estate having the huge downturn it did, being a Great Recession, ended up moving independently. Multi-units recovered 75% within the first, was it 10 months or 12 months or something like that? They started moving independently. So, could we as an economy continue to have low, quote unquote, supposedly CPI? Could we as an economy continue to have low gross domestic product? Could that continue for multiple years, and therefore, could the Fed not be aggressive about raising interest rates? Could we also have a very large debt, but we're not really interested in having an aggressive rise in our interest rates? So do I have an answer for you? Tomorrow, at some point, yeah. Can't tell you when.
I just want to say one thing. One thing to really look out for, which I'm guessing most of you probably aren't thinking about right now, is that it looks like it's starting to look like what they call the petrodollar, which is the U.S. dollar, is actually not going to be the petrodollar for much longer. To me, it looks like stuff's going to start trading in other currencies. They're actually going to use a basket of currencies instead for oil. And you're not reading this in the mainstream media at all, but it's happening actually in the background. It's actually been happening for about 2 years now, but it actually looks like it's getting pretty serious now. So do not be surprised if you see that actually happen in the next 2 years, I would say, 1 to 2 years, maybe even sooner. That could be one force that actually starts to cause a problem for demand of treasuries, for example. There's other ways to offset it, and if you really look at what goes on in the world, like there are times where the U.S. government, there's some kind of backdoor money that goes to a country like Switzerland, and then you look at who bought all the treasuries this quarter, and it's like one country bought all the treasuries, or a lot of the treasuries out of nowhere to stabilize everything, and you're like, what? That makes no sense. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on. So I think they can still keep control, but I would very closely watch the petrodollar to see what happens with that.
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm not moderator. Go ahead. I was going to elaborate on what the petrodollar is and how it works in the global economy and how money comes into
I'm assuming that everybody knows the petrodollar.
I was going to build on what Jeremy just said and say there's another thing coming down the pike with the end of the LIBOR. And we should talk about that a little bit.
That's going to be a great question.
Well, that's like the next 12 months that they're getting rid of LIBOR?
Yeah. No, even sooner.
Do you guys have any comments on that?
I mean, I don't have a specific forecast of what's going to happen from that. That's, it's hard to predict. I don't know if anybody else does.
No, I don't. Sorry.
To be determined.
Does anyone want to know what the petrodollar is and the effect? Yes. So here's the deal. Global oil is traded in U.S. dollars, right? So as long as oil and other, it happened in 1971 or 3 as a result of the Goldwater.
I think it was 74.
74, the Goldwater Accord, is that what it was? I didn't know there was going to be a pop quiz too, but anyway. So it started in 1974. Okay, I was close.
You're close.
Gold and oil and a lot of other major items began being traded in U.S. dollars. As long as all of those items are traded in U.S. dollars, then the rest of the world has to sort of work through our economy. They have to take their dollars to a trading window, trade them for U.S. dollars, buy oil or whatever the commodity is in those dollars, and then take it back home. And basically what that allows us to do is it allows us to outsource, for lack of a better term, the failings of our economy on the rest of the world, right? So everyone has to trade in our dollars.
But yeah, and I want to add that, so when someone gets US dollars for the oil they sold, what are they going to do with it? That actually generates a demand for these treasuries and other things, where the money comes from.
Right. So as long as oil and other major commodities continue to be traded in US dollars, then it's going to stabilize our economy. What Jeremy was referring to is what we call the decoupling of the petrodollar. Other nations have sort of said, we're not interested in supporting the U.S. economy anymore. We want to move away from trading for oil in U.S. dollars. We want to trade for oil in gold. We're in our own dollars. The country of Iraq, for example, in I think it was 1989, made a serious move to begin trading for oil in Russian rubles. We went to war with them, right? So we have a very strong incentive to continue trading oil in the U.S. dollars, but it probably won't happen forever. And as soon as it stops happening, we're not going to be able to float our way out of debt anymore. So basically what happens is there's this ratcheting up of debt in this country, and why is it able to go on and on and on and on? It's because the rest of the world has to trade in our dollars.
Is there a question over here? So, what about what are the big boys doing? So looking at like institutional money and REITs, like what's their position right now? I know you asked the question about kind of some of the smaller guys. Are those guys still buying? Are they selling? Is it a combination of both? What's the institutional money in real estate these days?
So, this is just my opinion. So I'll tell you a quick story, right? So in 2007, I was standing at the top of one of the towers, literally the top floor, in a real estate meeting. So I'm a grad from working school, and I go to the Work Real Estate Club, and basically everybody else there is one of the institutional guys you're talking about for all these big companies. And I just never forget, we were like 50 people standing around the room. We went around the room and talked about what everybody was doing. And everybody was just laughing at the cap rates that they were paying and the prices they were paying, but they were still investing because they have all this money that they have no choice but to put to work. They just have no choice. So, I'm actually involved with a very fifth largest mobile home park owner in the U.S. and they're selling a large portfolio right now to an institutional buyer who's happy to buy it. And I'm looking at that saying, yeah, feel free to buy it from us, like you're buying it at the peak, but they probably have to put the money to work. So, I hope they're not listening to this because if I screw that deal up, there's going to be a big problem. It's like a $300 million deal. I really don't want to get in the middle of it. But anyway.
Can we delete the last 30 seconds or something?
Yeah. So anyway, I think to answer your question, I don't know if they're a good place to look for it as an indicator because they always have to put money to work, and that's a big problem. And they're the ones that drive these crazy Class A cap rates down.
And when you talk about smart money, like one of the things somebody asked about smart money earlier is like they have a lot of money, but they're not maybe forced to be as efficient with the returns on that money, and it's actually gets to be harder to be efficient when you're talking about that level of dollars. You're not going to own 1,000 single-family residences and control those. At some point you say, I'm going to own maybe multiple apartment buildings. And at some point you say, I'm not going to fuss with apartment buildings anymore. I'm going to move on to Class A, commercial properties. So you start moving up in your grade of property, having as much to do with management and the amount of bulk of money you can put there versus its actual core return.
And I think the best story I have from this year is a very large pension fund in Canada, who I know, which I will definitely not name, especially if it's being recorded, literally has to put like $500 million to work this year, and they were trying to figure it out. I was trying to help them to find some properties in the U.S., and they couldn't find anything they thought was reasonable, which I actually thought was a very prudent move, which was surprising. So what did they do instead? Because they have the person who's heading this up, who I know, has to put this $500 million to work this year. So what they were doing, which is pretty incredible, is they were pulling these special clauses in their contracts on the properties that are already owned to force the buyout of all of their operators. They said, look, we're just going to buy the rest of the the rest of the ownership of the properties we already own. I don't know how they determine the prices, which was bound to basically cause a huge problem for them, because if they're forcing these people out who were their partners in running these properties, how are they going to find more people to invest with in the future? It's just not a good networking move, right? Networking 101. But they're like, look, I literally have no choice but to do this because I'm going to get fired if I don't put this money to work, and now I'm going to basically endanger our ability to invest in the future. But that's how forced they are to actually put their money to work. So it's currently happening right now. So it's literally the opposite of what do you do with your what do you do with the cash you're sitting on. They literally cannot. They will lose their job if they sit on the cash.
Let's talk a little about the global, because it seemed like a year ago we were worried about Europe melting down and Asia was melting down. It seems like the rest of the world has been somewhat stable here for the last, for most of 2017. And Christine, I'll ask you first, what global things are you seeing out there that you're keeping an eye on as far as how other large global economies are really progressing or falling apart?
I'm keeping an eye on our, nuclear conversations right now, honestly, and I'm keeping an eye on China. Even though I think China's gone kind of quiet. And the truth is that Europe as a continent seems to have stabilized itself, so I'm actually not paying attention to those. I used to, and when I started my club, it must have been 2009 or 2008. Jeremy's not going to remember. But at some point, I need to look up when I started my club. Every single meeting I had was me delivering economic information. Every single one. Literally the packets were this big, because I hadn't figured out how to make sure everything was on PDF and scan it in. I was following his model. I was just following him. It was all his fault. And his stack was this big, because that's what David and I was at Jeremy's meeting. And it was focused on Greece and the economic meltdown there, and what would it mean to have this large economy, the largest economy that's ever been posted on its debt? What does that mean to us? And what's the shadow housing market that's out there that the banks are refusing to liquidate? And I was really, every single month, I was going through what I felt like was both the national and international. I'm not that diligent on it. There isn't that much out there that feels that unstable to me.
Steve, what about you?
I have to agree, there's not that much out there that feels that unstable to me, even with North Korea acting that way. I don't feel any threat from the rest of the world. That could change, but at this point in time, we have one person or one state that's sort of acting out, and it's been a state that's been acting out for the last 20 years, as long as I can remember. So I'm not seeing too much externally. However, we do have to consider that things are likely to change, and they could easily change, right? So you have a state that has access to nuclear weapons, you have a state that has access to missile technology. They're always looking to improve that. And what are we going to do about it? I don't know. Sooner or later, we're probably going to have to do something about it. Right now, I don't feel too much of a threat.
I definitely read the news every day, the international news, but I don't track anything specific. I mean, the petrodollar, for example, that can affect us directly is something that I'll really pay close attention to. But, I am less concerned about whether some country somewhere defaults on its debt and that actually trickles down to us because I actually don't care what causes our next downturn. All I care about is that I actually thought it was coming and I actually invested the right way for it, right? So to answer your question, I don't really track it that closely because I really don't care how it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I'd probably be more concerned about it 1, 2, 3, 4 years into a recovery, like sidelining what I'm thinking is happening. But if I'm expecting a recession really close by, I'm going to pay less attention to it. I will say one thing though, if you do a little research on North Korea, what you will find is that creating a rocket that can hit the West Coast with the weight involved of a nuclear warhead is actually not possible for them to do right now, or it's very, very unlikely, and probably unlikely for another 2 to 4 years. That's the reality, not what you read in the mainstream media. So, you should do a little research if you don't know what I'm talking about. So, I'm not all worried about getting hit by a nuclear weapon. I do think they will preemptively take care of them sooner rather than later, so they won't let them get there. I won't get into the math. There's a math about how a rocket works and payload and all that kind of stuff.
This is the downside about having Allie here. We'd have had half an hour on China's economy. It's about to melt everything down.
Alan had a topic. Okay. Not Alan, I'm sorry, Steve had a topic. Sorry, I messed up your name. I apologize. No, I don't know we have to fill, I just actually wanted to hear it.
Oh, okay.
So, but if you actually have more questions, I apologize, I didn't mean to hijack your role.
No, historically, that's been something that we talked so much about, and it has seemed like the rest of the world has kind of calmed down. I mean, at least economically, when we talk about there's been so many factors that look like we're about to have a recession, but then other factors that seem to support the economy.
The truth is the rest of the world hasn't calmed down. So like debt to GDP levels in all these countries that had problems 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago is probably only worse than it was before.
It's exactly the same. It stabilized that.
Just plateau.
Right, but it's just a question of what is being covered by the mainstream media. I think everybody here thinks it's calmed down because they're not reading anything about it.
Maybe we're causing enough news coverage in our own country, we don't have to look outside.
Yeah, that's right, but it also creates the much more distinct possibility for what they call a black swan, which is you knew that the debt GDP in Spain was very high 2 years ago, and all of a sudden it's not a problem. No, like tomorrow it blows up, and you're like, well, how did that happen? It's just because we're not paying attention to it.
And just to encourage you guys, I mean, you can find that out. The list of, I think Wikipedia has a list of maybe not the most current, but if you really want to be simple, you just go to Wikipedia and say, what is the debt to GDP? Type it in, and you'll find a list, and you'll find where we are on the list. You can find the previous list, you can find this year's list. You get a sense for me, I feel like it gives me a sense for where do we and our level of debt to GDP fit in this general hierarchy, and who are these other countries, and do I consider them stable or not stable, and what's their economic history? So I personally like looking at that one statistic. The other statistic I like looking at was organized defaults in countries, and how many organized defaults countries have had on their debt. Now, that's not really fitting for us because our economy is so huge that a default of any kind on our debt would have a huge contingency to it. I think I said the word right, I'm not sure. And that would affect the international markets unduly, to say the least. But it does give you a sense for it. This is something that countries do, and there is something that does occur there, versus going, oh my gosh, Greece is going to have a default. So just ways to ground yourself in some long-term history when you hear these, scandalous or articles that are trying to get your attention from high.
Question.
What about conditions like climate change? You know, like in Puerto Rico, there's like about 3.5 million U.S. citizens living there, and there's like about 2.5 million living here. And they, you know, the country was already bankrupt. They believe that given the fact that it was already bankrupt, people were losing their pensions, and you know, now it's totally wiped out right now. The country, they haven't had food or electricity for a while. They're predicting a massive exodus of Puerto Ricans moving to the mainland. And a lot of investors like us are, you know, we own multiple properties, and we're holding on to this real estate. And not only that, but like in August, the median home prices of the houses here in Los Angeles County, it reached the highest ever to $580,000 here in LA County. So I mean, some are predicting that real estate is a new gold rush. Would you guys agree with that, or what do you?
Well, I think your original question was on climate change, which I think is an interesting one, and how that might affect the economy. And one other thing real quick is that, you know, you talk about Puerto Rico mass migration. Same thing happened in Louisiana with Katrina.
Yes.
And for almost every person that moved out, someone else moved in because all of a sudden there were construction
In
jobs.
Houston, they're pretty good. It's going to happen there too.
Yeah, so I think as far as that type of thing, I think, you know, whether it's work, and we talked a lot about unemployment today, people will somehow relocate for jobs. But specifically on climate change, any thoughts on how that may affect our economy moving forward? Is there growth opportunity in green technologies perhaps that may help offset a recession or spike in a new growth timeframe?
They're both looking at me, so I'll answer.
We're trying to figure out if the science is settled. That's what we're trying to figure out.
I will actually answer on a different angle.
Trump's green
I have a whole answer, so go for it.
I will actually answer on a different slant. So, you know, I personally consider this when I'm investing, and so I'll give you some examples. I have some self-storage investments in Florida, and the reason why I'm comfortable with that is because they're basically a box with no windows, and usually the worst of the damage is that, and they're designed to withstand a certain wind category depending on when they were built. And so if you have a relatively new one, you're going to be pretty much okay in the vast majority of hurricanes. And the worst that's going to happen is some air conditioning units that either on the roof or on the ground are going to have to be replaced. And you may have some debris that maybe some signage or something like that, right? So that's an example of something that might do okay. Whereas if you end up investing in a 40-story office building in Miami, you have other risks, right, associated with that. I don't want to spell them out. The point is that you've got to think about those things. And climate change, you know, those types of storms are possibilities for the future. So you've got to think of earthquakes, you've got to think of hurricanes, tornadoes, and other items that you want to consider. And you can think about it across any asset class, really. But you need to think about it for the future. But it's not something new. You know, it's something you just have to consider in advance.
Because they were predicting the downturn around this time last year, so a lot of my buddies investors, they started selling. But I mean, we reached a peak in August, you know, here in LA County.
Yeah, well, I was just addressing the climate change. The pricing is a different story. So to answer your gold rush, you know, here's the thing about gold rush. Between 2005 and 2007, I was younger, and I was going to more dinner parties back then without kids. And let me tell you that I was annoyed as hell, because I went on for 2 years telling people that there was going to be a big housing downturn, because all I had to do is look at the charts, right? Because it was possible to predict something was going to happen if you looked at the numbers. If you paid attention to the media and other things, maybe it was a little more difficult. It's a cycle. It's always a cycle. So how much will it come down? Nobody knows. When it'll happen, nobody knows for sure. But the point is that if your question is like how much higher we can go higher, you know, but eventually it will come down again. So you've got to be very careful and understand that we're at the end of the cycle. We talked about how far along the cycles we are. You've got to look at like the probability of where we are, when it's going to happen. Probably in the next 3 years to 4 years, almost certainly. And how much will it come down? Nobody knows. So it depends on if you're talking about doing a flip for 6 months or holding something for 10 years. And then how much risk you're willing to take.
But given the fact that there's low inventory and there's going to be
we're going to move on because we have a couple more questions running out of time here. That's a great question for North Italia. Take that with us over there. I want to talk about one more thing before we kind of get some final thoughts here. We really haven't talked about class inequality, and I think that's a big thing both from a local and from a global standpoint. The separation between the ultra wealthy and the ultra poor seems to keep getting wider and wider. How do you guys see that, and what impact do you think that's going to have coming forward? Christina?
Okay, so usually when I hear that question, I hear connected to something like, can you believe this would possibly continue? This is so wrong. Is usually what I hear it attached to. And please, nobody throw rotten tomatoes at me. I think just lettuce. I like lettuce. I'll go with that. Yes, it can continue. And yes, it probably will continue. And how will it continue to affect us is that we'll continue to see concentration of wealth in the upper 1%. We'll continue to see 80% of assets being in that percentage and the rest being diversified across everybody else. And how long can it go? Well, I'm going to say again, just for lettuce. If you look at France, it went on for a while until somebody said, king and queen got beheaded. So it can actually go on for a while. I mean, if you look at our history and even, in particular England's history, where we had a huge difference between the serfs and the landowners, there's actually a lot of history to suggest that there is often a big space between the wealthy landowners and people who invest in real estate, and the people who quote-unquote work. The merchant class is actually relatively new in our general history. So with those things in mind, am I in support of it? No, I'm not in support of it. I'm simply speaking more of kind of what I've observed over time. Will it start to change and alter? Yes, but will it change and alter in the next 20 to 30 to 40 years? Probably not. I'll probably continue to concentrate.
So Steve, what about you specifically? What kind of impact or opportunities that have on real estate? Because you're dealing with that 1%.
Yeah, I represent wealthy people, so I'm not sure that I have a lot to add in this particular question.
Other than it will probably continue?
Other than it's human nature, it seems like it's gone on for
all
those time, and will likely continue for the foreseeable future. I don't really have anything to add. I do have an interesting question when we get through this one, if we have time.
All right, if you look at the charts, you'd see that the big problem we're having right now is that corporations are retaining a high percentage of their profits, and it's not trickling down to the workers. So that's a problem. And I think another problem is that I'm personally not 100%. We don't have all the details about the tax plan, but I'm not convinced that this tax plan is necessarily going to redistribute wealth that well. And so with that in mind, I don't expect much is going to change for the next 3 to 4 years. I cannot forecast what's going to happen after that. I will tell you though that based on the charts, I think that because we're at a pretty extreme time right now, usually when you get to like an extreme point, things tend to revert back. As an investor, I'm not worried about it over the next 5 to 10 years. I'm not referring, I'm worried that there'll be some, demonstrations and other things. And I actually think one horrible thing that's going to happen right now is this minimum wage to $15 all of a sudden is going to result in robots, and it's going to be even worse for those people without them realizing it. And that's going to cause other problems, but that's what's happening. And so I hate that it's happening, really hate that it's happening, but it's happening. From an investment standpoint, I'm not worried about it for the next 5 to 10 years, because even if it does revert a little bit, it's probably not going to shift really quickly, and I think it's going to happen as a result of certain government, whether it's tax rate increases on the rich that will then bring down some of the inequality, whether it's, there's a number of factors that can actually start to help the situation, but it's going to be a slow process probably, if it does go in the right direction.
And okay, one more statistic on that. But if you do look at the top 500 wealthiest people in the United States, or top 500 wealthiest people internationally, you can look up this list gets published every year, so you can look it up. The average churn rate on that is 30 to 40% of the people fall off of that list. So if that helps anyone, we're actually kind of mobile when it comes to what is that 1% and who are in that. The Johnson & Johnson will probably always be there, right? And there are but the Walmarts, they're kind of newer. So it's not really as static as it might appear to be. I've noticed it continues to exist.
Can I just add one more thing? I'm sorry, Mary. So don't be fooled by the tax plan to this extent. About 69% of the population in the U.S., over 100 million people of eligible taxpayers, pay literally zero or almost zero in tax. Now think about this. Then there's like the top 5% who, if they get a tax break or whatever it is, are probably not going to spend that much more money anyway. So then the only good that this tax plan can do to begin with is maybe on a quarter of the population spend just to begin with, right? So this it sounds great in the media, Trump likes to talk about it and everything else, but the reality of the effect that it could have, even if it does help a little bit, is probably less than you picture given what they have you believe in the mainstream media to begin with. So,
Steve, what was your question?
So I have two things to say. One to Christina's point that the top wealthiest 5% or 500 people is not static. Every single culture has the equivalent of the saying, from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, right? Every single culture, the Japanese culture, the equivalent is from rice paddy to rice paddy. So it's not static. Wealthy families, if they don't plan, if they're not smart about their money, they become wealthy in a generation, they hold the wealth for a generation, they lose the wealth for a generation. So commonly it does turn. But there are some wealthy families that we can point to, like the Rockefellers and others, where it's held on for a long period of time. Generally speaking, there is movement in that. My question was this: if we all believe that we're heading toward the future of automation, how do we invest from a real estate perspective if we really believe that most jobs are going to be replaced with automation?
I asked Jeremy.
From what I've heard, some people that are smart money, they multi-family and medical office. They're not, they're very large retail developers in many states. They're not touching their selling anything in retail. They're not building any more retail apartments, which is a big shift. It's like a family friends, multi-generation developing shopping centers, not apartment buildings. It's a medical office. It's like people are always getting sick, they pay rent. People have to need somewhere to live. But if those people don't have jobs, that's they're smaller workforce.
Right, so I think in your scenario you have to be careful because you're looking at people who are moving out of retail into something else. There are a lot of other forces that are driving people out of retail. One particular guy's name is Jeff Bezos. And he's basically saying, hey, they're killing retail, right? So I think it's an interesting thing to consider. Our future is going to be very, very different. I have young children. I'm very concerned about what direction do I push them, what areas work will be available to them at that point in time. How is that going to affect investing, and how is it going to affect real estate?
Have them learn Mandarin and how to code.
but honestly,
never learned either one of those.
Automation is something I've been trying to get my arms around for like a year or two. It's something I think about a lot, and I think one of the key things to automation is exactly when you think it's going to happen. Now, what I mean by that is, let's just take cars, like talking about self-driving cars, which will shift a lot of things around, and also which will lead to a lot of job losses across taxi drivers and Ubers, and probably most importantly, the 14 million truck drivers in the U.S.
More job loss on motor be a shift to electric cars.
Yeah,
repairing petrol engines
and body repair because we won't have accidents.
Right. Yeah, there are so many aspects, and so like I have to think about. I invest across all asset classes, so I have to try to figure out every single one. So the answer to the question is it really depends on which asset class you're talking about, and then each one can be like examined separately. It also depends on the timing. There's no doubt that some of this is going to happen almost certainly, even if you think it might happen in 20 years instead of 10. There's a lot of change that's coming up, that's for sure. And a lot of it is going to affect, it's interesting, you can read a lot of different opinions too. Some people think that, for example, people won't mind commuting as much because they'll be able to sleep in the car or do work in the car, so they won't care if they live an hour and a half away from work anymore. That actually won't be as big an issue. And frankly, with the efficiency of cars, the cars will be able to go faster and the commute will be shorter. And so if you believe that, then all of a sudden, like, the idea that, office may have not been as popular in suburban areas before, now becomes more popular again, they don't mind driving from one suburb way down to another. That doesn't have to be necessarily where they live downtown to where they work. There's so many different ways to look at this. It's a very long topic that you're asking.
All right, save it for the end. Right.
All right, so we've run a little long, but there was so much good information, I figured it was worth it. So we're going to cut it off for tonight. Let me get a round of applause for